Hey yo, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ben, just a guy who loves DFS and is working on making it a sustainable source of income. Want to be profitable long term. This isn't just for fun. I'm doing it as a stream of income, and so I'm trying to become as good at that as I possibly can. So if you are feeling the same way, if you're in a similar boat, I don't claim to be anybody or to be successful. I'm still learning how to do this. I have been playing DFS for 5 years now. I will say that I believe that I'm pretty sharp in terms of building lineups and game theory and things like that. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to continue to improve and just really get good at, again, making this something that's sustainable. So contest selection is something that's really important, something I haven't done well this year, and something that I want to continue going forward. But my goal with this channel is to share my journey, my ups and downs with you. So really to be in this together, rather than, we have so many pros and people that we can go to for content and lineup reviews and things like that from their point of view. But I also think it's helpful to, for people in the same position to have a conversation, so to speak. I know that I'm not speaking to you, but I am, or you're not able to speak back. But going through this together is helpful. So this is from week 16. This video is going up late because I felt shitty earlier in the week. But I'm trying to be consistent with this. So even if nobody watches this, that's okay, because I am here and showing up and doing it and getting a little bit better myself. This is part of my process now, and process is everything. So here we go. So this particular contest was my single entry tourney lineup for the weekend. This is entered into the 10K slant. This was kind of like a fun, because the slant is actually a contest that I really liked, because it had a big, sexy payout, the normal slant that is. But it's a very flat payout structure, relative, I guess, at least to the bigger tournaments on DraftKings. So, you're getting a decent prize if you place first, but then you're also still getting a decent prize even if you don't place first. They believe, first glance here, it looks like they kept a similar payout structure to the actual slant. I'm guessing why it's like the mini slant. But what I really liked about this one is that 1,300 entries. Loved the fact that this gave me an actual shot at first. 39 entries. Still don't love that. I definitely want to be entering single entry 3 max contests for the most part, but if I think that I'm building a lineup differently enough than the field is, then I still don't hate my chances up against people who are multi-entering. So, excuse me. Let's look at what we've got here. So this particular lineup scored a 153.76 overall. I came in 127th out of that 1,300. First place was a 195, excuse me, 8-2. So, my lineup. So this week, the Falcons-Chiefs game was really the game that stuck out on the slate, which I loved because I didn't actually love it as much as everybody else did. So, as you'll see, I don't have any Falcons or Chiefs in this lineup, and my reasoning for that is the Chiefs, obviously great plays in terms of raw, but price considered, I didn't love them because they're all priced way up there for their ceiling. So Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey all priced up for their ceilings. And I just did not think this was a game where they were going to hit their ceiling. Atlanta has a better than perceived defense. And even though they're going to be throwing the ball, even though they're going to try to win this game, I just didn't think it was a game where it was going to be a shootout, which was kind of the public perception. And I ended up being pretty much dead on with that in terms of how the game ended up playing out. It actually almost went to overtime and ended up being high scoring. as Mahomes threw a touchdown late in the game, and it didn't go to overtime because the Falcons kicker missed a field goal. So I was hugely cheering for that. And so what I wrote in kind of my late week write-up, my Saturday sharpening, which I'll put down below here so you can check that out for yourself. Just a guide that I use. I came up with a bunch of journal prompts to help me through kind of my late week thinking. And what I came to in that I actually did on Sunday morning was I really liked this Houston-Cincinnati game. I thought that it had a chance to be just as much of a shootout, if not more, than the Falcons Chiefs game. Dead on with that. So 2 for 2 there. So I played my main stack with Deshaun Watson and Brandon Cooks, bringing it back with T. Higgins. So I love Deshaun Watson this week as, just somebody who should run over the Bengals. Figured that Cooks people are down on him a little bit because he hadn't done much since Will Fuller went down, but he's still a main target in that offense. It hurts a little bit because I didn't enter this lineup everywhere. There were a couple receivers that I couldn't choose between, and so I didn't have Cooks in all of my lineups, which, as you can see, hurt me because I used Tyler Lockett in one of my other lineups, who was like a couple hundred more than Cooks, and I just figured that he could have a big game, and the underneath passing, Seattle needed to win that game against the Rams. But yeah, just not a good play. That didn't work out. This one did. Worked perfectly in terms of the bring back with T. Higgins, who was just way too cheap for his role in that offense with Tyler Boyd out. Brandon Allen at quarterback, we didn't expect him to be anything special, but they were going to have to be throwing the ball against a bad Houston defense. I love, love, love targeting game environments where you have two capable to explosive offenses and average to below average defenses, and this game was exactly that. So I love the fact that it wasn't going super high owned. I mean, look at that stack. Love that. T. Higgins was popular because of his price with Tyler Boyd out, but to get my main stack at a combined, 34% ownership is damn good. So love that game. I actually played Brandon Allen on a $1 entry, and that ended up being the play because at almost $3K less than Deshaun Watson, I think he came close to, I think he tied his score or something, or he was in the same range basically, maybe a little bit less, but threw for over 300. Just it's such a great play. And I've talked, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll notice that I talk about paying down for quarterback as much as I possibly can. A little bit bummed that I didn't do that. I just thought my floor and ceiling combo was so high with Deshaun Watson this week. The one bummer in this game is that, I guess Gio Bernard coming back was actually a decent play, and I liked him and T. Higgins as a block of players who the Bengals were basically going to have to use with Tyler Boyd out to stay competitive in this game. And Gio ended up scoring even less than he could because Samaje came in and vultured 2 touchdowns and had a decent game himself. But the other piece I was referring to is that I missed on running back David Johnson. He had a big week last week with 11 receptions, over 100 yards receiving, and he bumped all the way up to 6,100 this week, and I just didn't think he was in as good of a spot. I didn't expect them to use him as heavily in the pass game again. Figured that was kind of an outlier, and that part was true, but what happened was that he still gashed them on the ground. So where this hurts is that I could have had him instead of Melvin Gordon here at 500 less, who, yes, in a great spot against without Phillip Lindsay, against a Chargers run defense who is not good. They want to keep the ball on the ground, but I didn't love game flow for Gordon because I figured the Chargers would be leading. This actually ended up being closer than I expected. But I just thought that getting the lion's share of the carries, he's already getting a decent amount of work. And so to get all of the carries, they use him in the pass game, and to get goal line work at 5,600 was just like too hard to pass up. I didn't love that he was going to be higher owned, but for the price, I'm pretty much always going to take a bell cow or workhorse running back at less than 6K. I'm actually okay with this results. Unfortunately, he hit what I thought he could. I was worried about his floor in this spot. And, if we look back to this game that I thought was going to be high scoring, Deshaun Watson with Brandon Cooks and David Johnson, again, in general, in large field tourneys, you don't want to stack quarterback running back. But when you are playing smaller field, especially single entry tourneys, stacking a quarterback and a running back in a really high offense, kind of like we talked about on the short slate with Tom Brady and Fournette, while it isn't necessarily optimal for ceiling, it can be really great to expose you to getting all the points from that team, especially from these pass-catching running backs. That's the thing. A lot of people don't love this, and I'd be curious to see data on this at some point somehow. But these running backs that catch passes, they have an opportunity for both they're a receiver, so they make sense to stack. So anyways, hurts to not have David Johnson in that spot. My day would have been quite a bit nicer if I had landed there. My other two running backs that I really liked on this slate were Kareem Hunt and Antonio Gibson. Both failed from a results standpoint. Honestly, Kareem Hunt, this is actually okay, but he barely got there. This is like late in the game. He managed to get a rushing touchdown. I really thought that with the Cleveland receivers out, because they all ended up on the COVID list at the end of the week, that Kareem Hunt was going to be used kind of in the slot or as a receiver more than he was. So to see him with 3 receptions here, I truly did not see anything less than 5 to 7 receptions coming. So that really hurt. They didn't use him the way that I thought they would. But the point there is that this was guesswork. Didn't know how he was going to be used. I guessed at it, and I don't love that. Again, I could have had, honestly, in hindsight, I would have kept Melvin Gordon, but would have played David Johnson over Kareem. Not super happy with this play. This felt like one of those plays where I was getting a little too cute. I thought I was being sneaky, and figured that I could get Kareem Hunt lower owned than he should be for his ceiling, which may be true, but it was thinner than I would have liked. Antonio Gibson, I was actually excited about just because I felt like he would be really low owned, which he was, as you can see here. In hindsight, with the ownership, love that. What I did not expect, this game, this score, that's not what the game looked like. That's way closer than what it actually played out. I live in North Carolina, so I watched a bunch of this game, got the Carolina-Washington game, and Carolina destroyed the Washington football team. It was like not even close. Antonio Gibson was not used. He still ran the ball. I mean, dude is the real deal. But he just didn't get the goal line work because they weren't in the position for that. And when I had watched the Cowboys game 3 weeks, was it Thanksgiving when he destroyed them? They were using him as a receiver out of the backfield, and so I felt really good about him at his price because I figured he was getting that role. Carolina doesn't have a great run defense, as you can see here, because he got this on like a handful of carries, 15 carries maybe, I don't even know. But I expected more receptions out of him. They did use McKissick quite a bit. McKissick outscored Gibson, and I didn't hate McKissick in this spot either for 6,400. So I really don't hate the play. Again, I was guessing a little bit of usage, but for a guy as good as Antonio Gibson is, and for as much as Washington has seemed to let him take the workhorse role, even though it's only been a couple games, they've shown that they really want to give him the opportunity to run with it. And I liked pairing him with the Washington football team again, who I thought was in a really, really good spot against Carolina in a game that was going to play a little bit slower. I don't normally like playing defenses in slower games because I wanted good defense that creates pressure against an offense that is going to be throwing a lot. Didn't expect that from Carolina, but what I did like was just the chance for suppressed scoring here. And because I expected Washington to be leading, I did figure that Carolina was going to have to throw a little bit more than they wanted to stay in this game, and that Teddy would take some sacks and have a couple turnovers. So all those things happened. I ended up getting a respectable score out of them, but unfortunately, Carolina on the other side of the ball was a smash play. I think they ended up with 21 points. I've been kicking myself all year. I mean, and this is part of the reason why doing this is really great for my process, is because I feel like a broken record. I come on here and I say, I could have paid $2,400 for the Carolina defense, who in hindsight was actually in a pretty good spot. They aren't an amazing defense by any means, but they are decent, and against a dreadful Dwayne Haskins, worth a shot on. I've been paying up for defense, basically in the mid-tier all year, but getting burned by it all year. Essentially because defense is so high variance, it's just not worth paying up for. It's worth saving that $500 to $1,000 you can in salary, and just essentially, unfortunately, hoping you hit. Yes, you can take an educated guess on putting yourself in a good spot for defense, but really, at the end of the day, when it comes to getting a high-scoring defense and finishing well on a tourney, unfortunately, it is just luck for the most part. Because you're just going to have to pick one of those lower-priced defenses and hope you hit, hope you get a touchdown from them, which Carolina did in this game, muff punt. But yeah. So I liked getting this correlation. I don't force this correlation, but when I do like both pieces, I'm definitely going to take it. And unfortunately, this game did not play out the way that I thought was most likely. Final pieces here are Allen Robinson and Parham Jr. Parham, I expected to not be the full Hunter Henry role, because it's just not reasonable to think that a young guy is going to step into the same role as a trusted vet like Hunter Henry. Fortunately, got lucky on a long reception here, and this is essentially what you're okay with when you're paying min price for a tight end. What I did really like was the combo of him and Mike Williams at 4,500. So there were a couple other lineups that I played where I had Parham and Mike Williams instead of T. Higgins, which I thought was a really sharp play in terms of price. They cost $7,000 combined, and I thought that they had a chance for 15 targets combined with Keenan Allen out. The Chargers are just so shitty, and this is the thing with the Chargers and the Broncos. Like, shitty teams, you have to be very, very careful with playing players from shitty teams, because they're bad for a reason and they're not consistent. The Chargers were just in such a good spot against a defense that is banged up, and they couldn't do anything. So I thought that was sharp. Thankfully, I didn't end up on that in this lineup, but I didn't hate Parham at min price, where I didn't love any other tight ends. Even Kelsey, way up there, didn't want to pay up for him. So that's the lineup here. Finishing with Allen Robinson. I loved Allen Robinson this week, as this was high price-wise. I don't want to pay up for Allen Robinson, who's essentially a possession receiver. He gets 8 to 10 yard targets. Yes, he's targeted close to double digits every game, but you need guys with a higher ADOT in order to like really make this worth it. But I thought that his chances at 10 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown were really, really solid this week against a terrible Jaguars secondary in a game that the Bears needed to win. If you would have told me that the Bears scored 41 and Allen Robinson did not score a touchdown, I would have been very surprised. I would not have believed you. I'm a Bears fan. So they're dreadful. Surprisingly playing for a playoff spot this weekend. But yeah, it's funny because like 10 receptions and 100 yards was exactly what I was hoping for from him. And I just expected a touchdown. So I thought mid-20s was a reasonable expectation for him. And I just thought it was so solid for him to get there. While I didn't think that he necessarily had 35 to 40 point ceiling, I just figured that his floor was so high in this spot, and I was okay paying up for that. So that is the lineup. Definitely feeling better about this than the past few weeks. I do wish that I had played this in more spots. My biggest weakness this year has been not going like true single entry, meaning that I have every week I've created a handful of lineups, basically putting my single entry, kind of my optimal lineup in the higher, the most amount of putting the most dollars behind this lineup and in the most spots, and then playing lower dollar for some of these other lineups, essentially hedging. Like I said, playing guys like Mike Williams instead of T. Higgins or Tyler Lockett instead of Brandon Cooks. But what I've realized this year is that my optimal lineup has done very, very well, as an average over the course of the year. And where I have failed is that I haven't trusted that enough. I've hedged too much, and I'm losing on the year because of that. I would be crushing on the year had I gone all in on this single entry, like a true single entry format where I'm just putting this lineup in everything. So definitely a weakness for me this year. It really hurts to look at that in hindsight and just know that my ROI would be, for one, in the black, but for two, like decently, and I would have turned a nice little profit at this point. So it's definitely something that I want to, obviously we're in week 17 here, and I'll play a little bit in week 17 and the playoffs, but something that I'm definitely going to take into next year. Contest selection, making sure I'm putting myself in small fields, 1,000 people or less. Definitely looking for the hundos on DraftKings, which I didn't even know about until a few weeks ago, which is frustrating to me. But the hundos are basically tournaments with 100 people in them, and they have all kind of like the low buy-in levels, $3, $9, $5, $9, maybe $27. I don't know, but yeah, contest selection and being confident in backing the lineup that I like, because what we have to realize as single entry players is that over time, too much hedging is going to end up exactly where I am this year, which is looking back and being like, if I had just stuck with my guns and went all in on this lineup, I would be doing really well, over the course of the year. Yes, there are going to be weeks where I don't do well, where I totally tank, don't have any ROI. But on the other weeks when I do stick with this, I'm going to be looking really, really good. So it's definitely the lesson that I've had to learn the hard way this year, and it's unfortunate. But because of that, as most lessons when learned the hard way is, it's really, really sticking with me. And I think I'm at the point where I'm like actually internalizing it and ready to take that moving forward. Let's quickly finish up here looking at the number one first place, $1,000 on his $9 entry fee. He's got Mitch Trubisky with Allen Robinson. Let's see, didn't bring it back with any Jags, didn't need to this week. He just went with the cheap quarterback and a solid receiver. I was playing with that combo as well, liked Mitch for cheap here. He played both of the running backs that we talked about, David Johnson and Gio Bernard. Yeah, love that game environment. He hit on that there. And then at other spots, the Chiefs that he played were Travis Kelce and Chiefs D. Love the Chiefs D call. I was on this. Again, now the results bear out. Not paying up for defense. Again, 7 points on 3,400, but I loved the leverage that this created. And we got Undakuva. I don't know what the hell it's supposed to mean. I'm not going to take time trying to figure it out. But using that leverage, he took the Chiefs here, and instead of playing Tyreek or Mahomes, he played Kelce, who is just so solid right now. Tight end otherwise is just a wasteland. And then this leverage, thinking that the Chiefs D might do well in this spot, gives you great leverage off of kind of the other passing game pieces. Love those plays by Undercover. Oh, Undercover. Look at that. We got Deontay Johnson and Jamison Crowder and Deshaun Jackson to finish out this lineup. Wow, look at this. Deshaun Jackson, he hits on with an 81-yard touchdown catch. I didn't even know Deshaun Jackson was playing, and I don't think most people did, given this. But, I mean, that's Deshaun Jackson at his finest right there. 3K, I played him earlier in the year a handful of times, completely bombed on him the times that I played him. I've never played Deshaun Jackson in a good game, mostly because I wasn't playing him in the past. But what an awesome flex play by Undercover. And, love Jamison Crowder and Deontay Johnson. He essentially just piled up targets. Two receivers that are going to get their targets, going to be looked at in the red zone. Jamison Crowder, I had him on my list as somebody I liked at 4,500. I just didn't know. It's just been so hard to trust the Jets, and under Adam Gase, they're just so idiotic. They just aren't throwing the ball even when they're down. So I just didn't trust him in this spot. But Jamison Crowder, a guy who's almost always going to see 8 to 10 targets in this offense when healthy from Sam Darnold at 4,500. Solid play. Love that. Hit his ceiling. And then Deontay Johnson has just continued to be solid for the Steelers. Definitely not on my radar this week at 6,300. I would have much rather played Tyler Lockett or Brandon Cooks. But he got there with 21 points, finished with a 195.82 to bring it home for the $1,000. All right. That's it for this week's Week 16 lineup review. I'm doing this on New Year's Day. So I'm going to go prep for Week 17. Be curious to, if you guys like this, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe. Like I said, I want this to be a place where we can learn from each other and just try to bring each other up and make this profitable for all of us. So hit me up in the comments with how your week went, any plays that you liked from my lineup, any plays that you disagreed with, and just in general, how'd you do this past weekend and how you finishing out the year. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you guys. Hope you've had an awesome holiday season. Let's go into this 2021 year with good intentions. Good intentions. 2020 was a hard year, but we can make this better for ourselves and for others by really going into it with good intentions. Let's just put the energy of 2020 behind us. That doesn't mean that things are going to change necessarily, but let's continue to bring a positive energy into 2021. I'm excited to finish out the year here. I'm definitely planning on getting up a few of these playoff slates. Let's have some fun. Let's win some shit. And I'll talk to you guys next week.